The desert sun rose over the base, sharp and relentless, casting long shadows over the tarmac. Captain Elena Carter stood still in the heat clipboard in hand, watching as another squad of young male pilots strutted past her toward the row of Apaches. They barely looked her way, but their laughter carried just fine. One of them slowed his stride, tossed a grin over his shoulder, and called her Captain Clipboard with the same easy smugness he used to request coffee. The others chuckled like they'd heard it 100 times. Elena didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on the helicopters, tracing every motion of the ground crew, every snap of the safety straps, every spin of the blades. There was something in the way she watched them, like someone who had once known every inch of those machines. She didn't look at them the way support staff did. She looked at them like she missed the feel of their vibration in her hands, like muscle memory was still alive and restless under her skin. Sweat crept down her back, but she stood firm, jaw set, gaze fixed. The sun rose higher, but she didn't move to the shade. She didn't glance back at the pilots or give them the satisfaction of a reaction. They thought she was just good with paperwork. They were wrong. Captain Elena Carter moved through her routine with the kind of quiet focus that didn't ask for attention. She checked manifests, coordinated flight schedules, made sure fuel orders were confirmed and on time. To most of the base, she was the dependable woman who kept things running, not someone you'd imagine in a cockpit. Her uniform was always sharp, her tone calm, her clipboard steady in her hand. Nobody questioned her work ethic. They just assumed she had always been logistics, someone who'd never known the sharp snap of combat or the gut-deep feel of flying low through mountain valleys. But Elena remembered it all. The hum of the rotors, the pressure in her hands as she made split-second calls that meant the difference between life and death. Years ago, she had been one of the youngest pilots in her class to qualify on the Apache. And not just qualify. She had excelled, flying mission after mission with a calm that unnerved even the seasoned crews. That was before Kandahar, before the night mission that ended with civilian casualties, before the orders that didn't match the aftermath. She had seen what happened. She'd flown above it, radioed in the confusion, felt the dread settle in her bones. When the report came down clean and polished, she had refused to sign it. That choice cost her everything. They didn't strip her wings outright. That would have raised questions. Instead, they reassigned her to Fort Rucker. Then here, a place so far from combat, it might as well have been exile. She didn't fight the orders. She followed them. Most people on base never looked twice at her. To them, she was part of the background, a clipboard with a name tag. But Specialist Miguel Torres, a 20-something mechanic who'd only been at the base a few months, had started to notice small things. The way she watched flight drills. The way she moved around the Apaches like she knew their insides better than the tech manuals. One morning while they waited on a fuel delay, he asked where she'd been stationed before. She gave a polite answer, vague and short. He let it drop, but kept watching. Later that week, during a systems check, he made a joke about her probably knowing the birds better than half the pilots. She didn't laugh. Instead, she told him to focus on his checklist. Still, Torres noticed. The way she lingered near the helicopters. The way her fingers sometimes twitched like they were remembering flight controls. One day after a pilot barked at her over a delay, Torres caught the flash of hurt in her eyes before it vanished. He started to see her not as Captain Clipboard, but as someone who didn't belong in the back row. Elena never corrected anyone. She wore the silence like armor. Her tattoo stayed hidden beneath her collar, a quiet piece of a life she couldn't explain. It wasn't pride that kept her from telling her story. It was the weight of knowing the system had chosen to erase it. She'd come to accept the sideways looks and offhanded jokes. What mattered now was doing her job right, protecting the people who didn't know they needed protecting. Still, every time an Apache lifted off, a small part of her rose with it. Not with envy, just with memory. She didn't want to be a hero. She'd had enough of that. What she wanted was clarity. She wanted the truth to matter again. And maybe, though she'd never admit it out loud, she wanted someone to remember who she really was. Not for the medals or the hours logged, but because she hadn't backed down when it counted. The room was packed, the air thick with coffee and anticipation. A large screen displayed the Valley Route red markers flashing where scouts had reported insurgent movement. Elena took her usual seat in the back, barely acknowledged by the officers up front. Colonel Hart stood near the map, voice clipped as he read off call signs and assignments. The mission seemed straightforward. 4 Apaches were to fly a support sweep through the valley while transports made a medical supply drop in the next sector. Elena's pen hovered over her notepad. Something about the valley route didn't sit right. It was too exposed, too predictable for midday movement. Her eyes scanned the secondary roads, the ridgelines. She knew those paths better than most. She raised her hand, spoke before thinking too long, suggested the enemy might be staging a feint, that the real threat could come through the pass. Her voice didn't shake, but it felt like tossing a stone into a storm. The room fell quiet for half a beat. Then Hart looked at her, expression unreadable. He reminded her she wasn't part of the tactical wing and suggested she focus on her own assignments. Laughter followed from the front row. A pilot twisted around and made a joke about her clipboard having combat instincts. A few more chuckles, and then it was back to the mission briefing as if she hadn't spoken at all. Elena didn't react. She made a note on her pad, kept her face neutral, but her chest was tight. Not from embarrassment. From the sense that something had just been missed, something important. She stayed behind after the room cleared, reviewed the satellite feeds again on the screen. The terrain data still pointed to the pass as a more likely route. It offered cover concealment and the element of surprise. She stared at it, jaw clenched, helpless to change the plan already in motion. Outside, the sound of engines winding up signaled the mission's start. She stepped out into the sun, her gut knotted. The official plan was locked in, but in her bones she felt it. Something was off, and nobody wanted to hear it. The first explosion hit just after the Apaches cleared the southern ridge. From her spot near the operations center, Elena looked up, heart-lurching, as a plume of smoke bloomed against the sky. The sirens followed seconds later, loud and urgent. She ran toward the command post, dodging soldiers scrambling to their stations. Inside the room was chaos. Radios crackled with voices, one screaming that Wilson's bird was hit, another confirming a total loss of signal. The big screen showed a grainy feed from a drone. 2 burning wrecks marked the valley floor, and a third Apache was veering off, trailing smoke. Someone yelled for coordinates. Someone else cursed under their breath. Elena pushed through to the back, eyes locked on the map. It wasn't just a single ambush, it was a coordinated strike. Movement from the pass, too. The thing she'd warned about was happening in real time, both flanks closing in. It wasn't a sweep, it was a trap. Another voice came through the speakers. Jameson was down. Patel was flying wounded, trying to make it back. Elena scanned the terrain on the screen and knew he wouldn't make it across open ground. His altitude was dropping fast, his voice tight with pain. She grabbed the nearest radio, gave her name, and cut into the feed. Told Patel to head east to a valley that ran parallel. It wasn't marked as a landing zone, but it had enough cover and space to set down. She knew because she'd flown it years ago in another life. There was hesitation, then acknowledgement. The feed showed the lone Apache banking, heading toward the narrow gap in the ridgeline. Seconds later, a soft ping confirmed his emergency beacon. He was down, not dead. Around her, no one said much, but a few heads turned, eyes wide. They were starting to understand. She hadn't guessed. She knew. And now everything was unraveling. The command center was filled with shouting movement and the bitter edge of panic. Colonel Hart stood at the map table, his face hard as stone, while officers threw out plans that wouldn't hold. The remaining Apaches sat idle outside, fully armed but grounded, with no one left to fly them. Elena stepped forward, calm and clear. She said she could fly. The words dropped like a stone in water, rippling through the room in stunned silence. Someone laughed. Then Major Phillips shook his head, ready to dismiss her like always. She didn't flinch. Said she had over 2,000 combat hours on the AH-64 top ratings, multiple commendations. Said they could check her file if they didn't believe her. Hart stared at her, expression cold and unreadable. He asked why she hadn't spoken up before. She said it wasn't her place. She followed orders. Another explosion rattled the floor. Dust rained from the ceiling tiles. No one laughed this time. Phillips made a call to verify her record. Hart gave her one long look, then gave a sharp nod. She turned and walked out, not waiting to hear more. Her hands didn't shake. Her steps were steady. Behind her, someone muttered that they were out of options anyway. The air outside was thick with smoke. Sirens blared. Soldiers moved like pieces on a board, bracing for the worst. The Apaches loomed in the haze, waiting like sleeping giants. Torres was already there, checking systems covered in sweat and engine grease. When he saw her coming, he froze. She told him to suit up. He stammered something about not being certified. She asked if he could fly. He said yes. She said that was enough. They ran final checks together. She walked him through procedures with a calm that felt like muscle memory. Every switch, every panel came back to her without hesitation. Her fingers settled on the controls like they never left. The cockpit wrapped around her like armor. Through the glass, she saw Phillips jogging toward them, radio in hand. He held it up. Hart wanted to speak. His voice came through the headset, tight but steady. Said her record checked out. Said he'd cleared her for the mission. Then paused. Asked why her file was so redacted. Asked where she really came from. She told him she couldn't say. Not over an open channel. But she said one more thing. She told him she could do more with less. He went quiet for a second, then gave her the green light. She looked over at Torres, his helmet too big, his eyes too wide. She reminded him to stay close, watch her lead, and follow every move. He gave a shaky nod. Another blast echoed in the distance, closer this time. The base was getting squeezed from two sides. They were running out of time. She eased the collective, felt the rotors spin up. The bird trembled, then lifted into the smoke. The ground dropped away. Her pulse steadied. She was back. All the fear, all the silence, all the months of being told she didn't belong, melted into one crystal clear focus. She spoke to the tower, requested clearance. Got it. Torres lifted off beside her, wobbly but holding steady. Together they banked hard east. Two black shapes vanishing into the haze, headed straight toward the fight. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't pride. It was something simpler. The world was on fire, and she still knew how to fly through it. The Apache responded like it remembered her. Elena kept it low, just above the treetops, every movement smooth and precise. The ridgeline rose ahead, but she hugged the slope, using the terrain to mask their approach. Torres stayed behind her, holding formation better than expected. His breathing was heavy in the comms, but he didn't speak unless she asked. The pass was just ahead, tight and narrow, perfect for an ambush if they hit it right. Her targeting systems blinked to life. Thermal imaging lit up the screen, showing a convoy stretched across the canyon floor. Trucks, technicals, a few armored transports, all crawling through the bottleneck. They hadn't spotted her yet. That was the key. One clean strike before they could react. She dipped lower, banking hard, the canyon opening below like a perfect shot lined up in a scope. She fired first. The 30mm cannon tore into the lead truck, igniting fuel and flipping metal like paper. The blast rocked the column. Flames spilled across the narrow road. Secondary explosions followed. Ammo cooking off smoke, billowing vehicles swerving into each other. Panic spread fast. Some tried to reverse. Others tried to scatter, but there was no room to move. Elena circled, calm and deliberate. She picked off the ones trying to escape, targeting choke points. One after another, she blocked exits, turned the pass into a trap of their own making. Torres called out over the radio, voice tight with awe. He said they were pulling back. She told him to hold position. One more pass to be sure. She looped back, flew lower this time, slow enough to see the enemy scrambling on foot. Some dropped weapons and ran for the cliffs. The convoy was finished. Smoke filled the canyon, thick and black. Wreckage burned from end to end. Elena pulled up, let the wind hit her face through the cockpit vents. It felt like breathing again. For the first time in months, she felt alive, not tolerated, not ignored, just exactly where she was meant to be. The ridge opened to a wide basin, and Elena knew instantly this was where it would get bad. The valley was perfect for an ambush, open enough to draw in aircraft, but lined with ridges high enough to hide launchers. Her sensors pinged before she saw them, little red warnings blinking like nerves. She told Torres to hang back and keep eyes on her six. He acknowledged, voice tight but steady. She pushed forward alone, scanning for heat signatures along the ridgeline. The first missile launched from her 3 o'clock. She banked hard, left flares and chaff spilling from her bird-like sparks. The missile missed, barely exploding in open sky. She rolled under the plume and locked onto the launch point. A hellfire screamed from her pod and tore the ridge in half. The launcher vanished in a spray of dust and heat. Another ping. New lock. This time from dead ahead. She didn't wait. Fired preemptively and pulled up, using the terrain like a wave. The return fire came late and wild, chasing empty air. Torres called out a third heat source higher up. She spotted it just as the tube flashed. She dropped fast engines groaning, then flared at the last second. The missile passed overhead and slammed into the hill behind her. She came back up, sharp rage boiling into control. Fired again, no hesitation. The ridge cracked under the hit flames curling into the sky. The valley was clearer now, but not clean. One last launcher blinked on her screen, trying to reposition. She hit it before it could settle. Dust cloud, no more signal. Silence followed. The radar was quiet. Elena hovered for a second, eyes sweeping the terrain. Then she called it in. Airspace was green. Behind her, Torres gave a shaky laugh. She didn't respond, just turned back toward the base and said 2 words. Paths clear. The radio crackled with a new voice, low and calm, but cutting through the static like a blade. Blackhawk inbound call sign Blackbird 1. It wasn't on any manifest Elena had seen, and the tone was wrong for regular command. She checked her radar. One fast mover low approach from the east. No markings on the signature, but the pilot knew their airspace cold. The Blackhawk broke over the ridge like it belonged there. Sleek, dark, almost predatory. It moved with speed no standard evac bird should have. The pilot called again, requesting Elena and her wing to rendezvous at the plateau north of the valley. The voice used her name like it wasn't the first time, like it remembered her. Elena relayed the order to Torres, who followed without a word. His silence wasn't fear anymore. It was trust growing with every mile they flew together. The plateau was narrow, carved by wind and time. The Blackhawk touched down, first rotors slowing just enough to hold position. Elena landed, second, dust spiraling around her cockpit like smoke from a long battle. She climbed out, heart steady, breath tight. Torres followed, still looking like he wasn't sure where this story was heading. The side door of the Blackhawk slid open, and a man stepped down. He moved with the ease of someone used to commanding without speaking. His flight suit bore no rank, no insignia, but his presence did the talking. He came closer, pulled his collar aside, and revealed a tattoo on the right side of his neck. It was sharp black, a perfect geometric spiral, identical to the one hidden beneath Elena's own collar. She froze, something old and forgotten sparking in her chest. Operation Nightshade, a program that didn't officially exist. The tattoo was proof of belonging to something they never talked about in briefings. He asked if she still remembered the program. She nodded once. He smiled, not warmly but with recognition. Said her performance today reminded him why they created Nightshade in the first place. Torres looked between them, confused. Elena said nothing, just touched her collar. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like hiding it. The colonel finally introduced himself. Blackwell. He had designed the training she once survived, had chosen pilots who could think fast, disobey when it mattered, and adapt when rules got people killed. He said Nightshade had been shut down after politics made its freedom too dangerous. Said pilots like Elena were scattered, reassigned, silenced. But he never stopped watching. She asked why he was here now. He said command sent him to assess the situation. But the moment he saw her flying, he knew the mission had changed. He handed her a small metal token. It was a command authorization chip, the kind reserved for theater-level authority. He told her she had it now. She looked down at it, disbelief mixing with something deeper. She had been erased from records, buried in logistics. But here he was telling her it never changed who she was. Blackwell told her to coordinate the remaining air assets, said the SAMs were cleared, but reinforcements needed cover to land. He trusted her to handle it. Torres asked quietly what she was. She looked at him and said she used to be something called a Nightshade. Maybe still was. Blackwell turned to leave, but stopped. Told her one more thing. Pilots like her only come around once in a generation. She never stopped being one of them. The system just forgot. He didn't. Elena climbed back into the Apache with a new clarity in her chest. The battlefield hadn't changed, but something inside her had. She wasn't flying because no one else could. She was flying because she was born to lead. Over the comms, her voice was steady and sure. She gave coordinates, timed the supply drops, reassigned patrols where gaps had opened. No one questioned her now. The remaining defense teams followed her signals, trusting her read of the terrain. Blackwell stayed silent but watched every move she made. From the first minute, it was clear she wasn't improvising. She was commanding. Evacuation birds flew in low and fast. She cleared a path through the last ridge where a few insurgents still tried to hold ground. Her gun runs were clean, precise, just enough to scatter but not destroy. She wasn't fighting to win a medal. She was protecting people who never knew they owed her. Her orders saved fuel. Her timing saved lives. When the final wave of evac helicopters lifted clear, she circled once more, scanning every angle, making sure the air was clean. Back on the ground, the base smoldered in silence. Damage was real, but so was survival. Torres landed behind her, a little shaky, but alive. Blackwell met her on the tarmac. He didn't salute, just nodded the way one professional greets another. Around them, soldiers stared like they were seeing her for the first time. Colonel Hart stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He didn't speak at first, just looked at her, then at Blackwell, then back at her again. When he finally spoke, it was with something close to respect. He thanked her, in front of the entire ops team, said he was wrong not to listen sooner. She nodded, not with smugness, just quiet acknowledgement. It was never about proving them wrong. It was about doing what had to be done. Later that night, as the fires died down and the evac tally was confirmed, Elena stood alone near the edge of the landing zone. The stars had come out. The night was cold, clear, and still. Torres walked up beside her. He didn't say much, just stood there like he understood what this moment meant. Not victory, but return. She didn't need a medal. She didn't need a new title. What she had reclaimed was her own name, her purpose, the thing they tried to bury. Blackwell approached with a quiet step, handed her a small file. Inside was a letter, reinstatement, not logistics, combat command. She didn't cry, but something shifted behind her eyes. Gratitude, maybe, or release. She looked back toward the dark airfield and said the words softly. "You judged me by the clipboard I carried. You should have looked at the fire I carried with it." Then she turned toward the future, ready, again.